The hum of the diesel engine was the only music I needed. It was a constant, low-frequency thrum that vibrated up through the seat, into my bones, a lullaby for the weary. Outside, the state of Kansas unspooled like a bolt of brown and green fabric under a sky so vast it felt like a lid. I was on I-70, a river of asphalt I could navigate in my sleep. Wichita was a smear of light in my rear view, Topeka was a future problem, and my current goal was a truck stop just outside Salina where I knew they made a decent, greasy patty melt. This was the life. Monotonous, predictable, and my rig was my home. A 2015 Peterbilt 579. She wasn't the newest girl on the block, but she was reliable. I'd bought her 5 years ago from an old-timer named Jerry who was finally hanging up his keys. The sale included everything: the truck, the lingering smell of his cherry tobacco, and a box of his old junk he couldn't be bothered to move. Mostly it was logbooks from the 90s, a spare CB radio, and a thick, leather-bound atlas of the United States. I'm a GPS man, through and through. The calm, digital voice telling me about upcoming delays and the next rest stop is a comfort in the modern world. But something about that old atlas felt weighty. It was a relic. The pages were soft at the edges, stained with what I hoped was coffee, and it smelled of dust and time. I tossed it onto the passenger seat footwell and mostly forgot about it. That was, until a detour outside St. Louis sent me on a wild goose chase through a series of county roads my GPS couldn't quite parse. Frustrated, I reached down, grabbed the atlas, and heaved it onto the passenger seat. I thumbed through to Missouri. The map was outdated, of course, but the major highways were still there. As I traced my route with a greasy finger, I noticed something else. A faint, red line, drawn in what looked like pencil crayon, snaking away from a junction near a town called Prospect. It didn't lead to anything, just trailed off into the green blotch representing a state forest. I shrugged. Probably one of Jerry's old routes, or a fishing spot he'd meant to check out. I closed the book, found my way back to the interstate, and didn't think much of it. But a seed had been planted. The map wasn't just a map anymore. It was Jerry's ghost riding shotgun. Weeks turned into months. The atlas became an occasional companion, a piece of nostalgia I'd sometimes flit through during a long wait at a warehouse. I started noticing more of those faint red lines. A squiggle in the Nevada desert, off Route 95, the jagged fork near the forests of Upper Maine. They were all the same color, all drawn with the same unsteady hand, and they all led from a known road into the blank, uncharted spaces of the map. It was strange, but I chalked it up to an old man's eccentricity. Maybe this was his version of Here Be Dragons. Then, one rainy night in Oregon, everything changed. I was parked at a rest stop, the rain drumming a steady tattoo on the roof. I was bored, and for lack of anything better to do, I opened the atlas to the Oregon page. I was looking for a place I'd been to years ago, a little viewpoint over the Columbia River Gorge. My finger stopped. There was a new red line. I was sure of it. It hadn't been there before. It snaked away from Highway 26 deep into the Mount Hood National Forest, a place of dense, dark woods and little civilization. A cold trickle, unrelated to the damp air, traced a path down my spine. I stared at the line. It looked fresh. The red was brighter, more insistent than the others. I told myself I was being an idiot. I was just misremembering. The rain, the fatigue, the loneliness of the road, it was playing tricks on my mind. I slammed the book shut, stuffed it back in the footwell, and started the engine. The roar was a welcome distraction. I pulled back onto the highway, driving faster than I should have, trying to outrun a silly thought. But the thought had claws. It had hooked into me. Asterisk, what if the map was alive? Asterisk, the next few days were a battle of will. I found myself glancing at the footwell more often than at the road. The presence of the atlas felt like a physical weight in the cab. It was a silent passenger with a secret. I'd catch myself wondering about those red lines. Where did they go? Why did Jerry draw them? Or, a more terrifying thought, who was drawing them now? The compulsion to look at it again, to see if there were more, was like an itch I couldn't scratch. The ordinary, predictable rhythm of my life had been disrupted. The hum of the diesel no longer felt like a lullaby. It felt like a countdown. The destination was a grim, windowless warehouse outside of Fargo, North Dakota. It was the kind of place you unload at, get your paperwork signed, and leave without asking questions. The load was light, some kind of specialized machinery parts, and I'd made good time. I had a 34-hour reset ahead of me, and I planned to spend it in the relative civilization of Bismarck. About a 3-hour drive south, I was cruising down US 83, the prairie flat and endless around me. The sky was a dome of brilliant, cloudless blue. It was a perfect driving day. My mind was empty, lulled by the straight road and the monotony of the landscape. I reached for my coffee thermos, took a swig of the now lukewarm liquid, and my eyes instinctively flicked down to the passenger side. The corner of the leather atlas was just visible, a thought, clear and unbidden, cut through the mental fog. Asterisk check it. Check the map for North Dakota. Asterisk I shook my head, physically trying to dislodge the idea. No, I muttered to the empty cab. It's a stupid book, but the thought wouldn't leave. It pulsed in my mind with the same rhythm as the engine. Asterisk check the map. See if there's a road for you here. Asterisk it was the for you part that chilled me. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It felt like an invitation, or a command. My hands were tight on the wheel, my knuckles white. The compulsion was a physical force, a magnetic pull from that book on the floor. It felt like the entire cab was tilting towards it. With a groan of frustration, I pulled over onto the wide, gravel shoulder. The truck shuddered to a halt, kicking up a cloud of dust that glittered in the sun. For a long minute, I just sat there, listening to the asterisk TINK-TINK-TINK asterisk of the engine cooling. The prairie wind whistled softly outside. I took a deep breath, leaned over, and hauled the atlas onto the passenger seat. My hands were trembling slightly as I opened it. The pages felt different, warmer, or maybe it was just my imagination. I found the North Dakota page. My heart hammered against my ribs. There it was, another red line. This one was different. It was bolder, darker, as if drawn with more pressure. It started at a junction on US 83, right near a dot on the map labeled Lone Tree. I was just 20 miles south of that very junction. The line shot east, away from the highway, into a vast area of the map marked only by topographical lines and the words Mixed Grass Prairie. There were no towns, no other roads. It just went out there. And as I stared at it, a terrible, wonderful idea bloomed in my mind. Asterisk why not? Asterisk I had time. I had fuel. What was out there? What was at the end of that line? The desire to know was a sudden, feverish heat in my chest. It felt more important than sleep, more important than a hot meal in Bismarck. Before I could talk myself out of it, I threw the truck into gear. The tires crunched on the gravel as I pulled back onto the pavement. I drove north, my eyes constantly flicking to the odometer, counting down the miles to the Lone Tree Junction. The world outside seemed to sharpen. The green of the grass was more vibrant, the blue of the sky more profound. I felt more awake, more alive than I had in years. This was an adventure. This was breaking the routine. 10 miles, 5. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. I saw the sign for the junction up ahead, a simple, rusted county road sign. I put on my turn signal. The rhythmic asterisk click dash click click asterisk sounded like a metronome counting down the seconds. I slowed down, preparing to make the turn onto the narrow asphalt road that matched the beginning of the red line dot as the truck began to angle onto the new road. My eyes dropped to the open atlas on the passenger seat. I needed to see the line one more time to confirm my direction. And that's when I saw it, the red line on the map. It asterisk moved asterisk. It wasn't a trick of the light. The line, for a fraction of a second, pulsed. It grew subtly brighter, then darker, then brighter again. It was a slow, rhythmic throb. Exactly like a vein. A jolt of pure, undiluted terror shot through me. It was an instinctual, animal fear. This wasn't a map. This was a living thing, and it was leading me somewhere I did not want to go. That single, horrifying image of road pulsing like a vein shattered the trance. I wrenched the steering wheel back to the left, overcorrecting so hard the trailer swayed dangerously. The tires squealed as I fought to keep the rig on the pavement. I sped past the junction, my foot heavy on the accelerator, not looking back. I drove for an hour in a blind panic, my heart refusing to slow down. I didn't stop until I was on the outskirts of Bismarck. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, parked in the farthest, darkest corner, and finally let my head fall against the steering wheel. I was breathing in ragged gasps. I had almost done it. I had almost followed the line. What would have happened? I would never know. And that, I decided, was a good thing. I grabbed the atlas, intent on throwing it in the dumpster. But as my fingers touched the worn leather, a new, chilling thought occurred to me. If the map was alive, and it wanted me to go somewhere, would getting rid of it really stop it? Or would it just find another way? I didn't throw the map away. I couldn't. The fear it instilled in me was now a part of its value. It was a forbidden object, a cursed relic, and it held a power over me that was as terrifying as it was fascinating. I placed it on the passenger seat, buckled the seatbelt around it like the most macabre of companions, and tried to pretend it was just a book. The next week was a haze of sleeplessness and paranoia. Every shadow on the road seemed to writhe. Every flicker of my dashboard lights felt like a signal. The map just sat there, silent and heavy. I took a run down to Texas, hauling a load of refrigeration units to Laredo. The sun was bright, the traffic was loud, and for a few hundred miles, I almost managed to convince myself that the incident in North Dakota had been a hallucination brought on by fatigue. Then, one night parked at a dusty lot near the border, I broke. The silence was too loud. I had to know. With trembling hands, I unbuckled the seatbelt and opened the atlas to Texas. My blood ran cold. There were 3 new lines. One in the Big Thicket, one deep in the Chihuahuan Desert, and one that started from a farm road and pointed into the Gulf of Mexico itself. These lines weren't faint. They were a lurid, bloody red, and they seemed to squirm on the page if I stared at them for too long. The compulsion returned, stronger this time. It wasn't just a thought. It was a physical craving. My mouth went dry. My palms itched with the need to feel the steering wheel turning onto one of those unknown paths. The desert line called to me. It promised silence and emptiness and an end to the noise in my head. I started the truck. I was going to do it. I was going to drive into the desert and see what was there. But as I put the truck in gear, the CB radio, which had been silent for days, crackled to life. Not with the usual trucker chatter about bears and smokies, but with a voice, faint and shredded by static. ... turned off. Never saw. They never found the rig ... The voice faded, then came back, stronger, clearer. I'm telling you, Earl, that road ain't on any map. It just ain't there. I froze, my hand on the gear shift. It was a coincidence. It had to be, but it was enough. It was the voice of reason. Or maybe just the voice of another scared man cutting through the static and the compulsion. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. I was sweating, my t-shirt soaked through. I had been seconds away from becoming a story on the CB radio. A ghost story. From that night on, the map was no longer a passive object. It was an antagonist. It was a siren song bound in leather. I started having dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams where I was driving down a smooth, black road that had no end. In the dreams, the radio would pick up a station playing old, crackly big band music from the 1940s, and a smooth, calm voice would give directions. Turn left where the old oak split in two, it would say, or continue straight through the field of standing stones. I would always wake up just as I saw a faint, red glow on the horizon. My work began to suffer. I was late on deliveries. I looked haggard. Other drivers at stops would give me a wide berth. I was the gaunt, twitchy guy who talked to himself. The map was consuming me, not by showing me monsters, but by showing me possibilities. It was the ultimate what if, and the what if was a cancer, eating away at my sanity. I was a prisoner in my own cab, sharing my space with a thing I feared and, I had to admit, a thing I was beginning to need. The desire to see, to know, was becoming a part of my identity. I was the man with the living map, and a man needs a purpose. The breaking point came in the forests of Pennsylvania. I was hauling a load of furniture from State College to Pittsburgh. It was a short, easy run through the rolling, verdant hills of the Allegheny Plateau. It was a route so beautiful and mundane it felt like an insult. The map, sitting on the seat, felt like it was mocking me with its normalcy. I pulled over at a scenic overlook. Below me, a valley dipped and rose, a tapestry of deep green. It should have been peaceful. Instead, I felt a restless, gnawing energy. I grabbed the atlas. I didn't want to, but my hands acted on their own. I opened it to Pennsylvania. My breath hitched. There was a line. It was so close I could have spit on its starting point. It began right here, at this overlook. A thin, spidery red line that left the parking lot and dove straight into the dense, unbroken forest. The call was immediate and overwhelming. It was a scream in my soul. This was it. No more fighting. No more fear. The curiosity had metastasized into a full-blown obsession. I had to know what was at the end. I had to see the source of the pulse. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now secondary to the need for answers. I didn't hesitate. I put the truck in gear and rolled slowly past the do not enter sign at the end of the parking lot. The asphalt ended immediately, turning into a narrow, rutted dirt track barely wide enough for my rig. Branches scraped and screeched against the sides of the trailer, a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. I pushed on, the truck lurching violently over rocks and through potholes. The beautiful day vanished, blotted out by the thick canopy above. I was driving into a tunnel of green. I drove for what felt like an hour, though my clock seemed to be malfunctioning, the digits flickering erratically. The world outside grew darker, quieter. The birdsong ceased. The only sounds were the groan of my suspension and the frantic beating of my own heart. I had the atlas open on the passenger seat. The red line was no longer pulsing. It was now a constant, hellish glow, illuminating the cab with a faint, crimson light. The track began to descend, winding down into a deep hollow. The air grew cold, and a thin, unnatural mist began to coil around the tires. My headlights cut uselessly through the gloom, reflecting back off the fog. I was driving blind, guided only by the glowing line on the map. A deep, primal part of my brain was shrieking at me to stop, to turn back, but I was in too deep. I was committed. I rounded a bend and the trees abruptly ended. I found myself in a clearing. It was a perfect circle, devoid of life. No grass, no weeds, just hard-packed, dark earth. And in the center of the clearing stood a single, gnarled, and leafless tree. Its bark was black and twisted, and from its branches hung strange, pod-like objects that swayed gently in the still air. This was the end of the line. The red glow on the map was so bright it hurt my eyes. I had arrived. I brought the truck to a stop, the engine idling roughly. I sat there, staring at the tree. A profound sense of dread settled over me, so heavy I could barely breathe. This was no treasure. This was a place of ending. I looked at the pods hanging from the tree, and with a jolt of horror, I realized what they were. They weren't pods. They were cocoons, and one of them, the largest one, was slowly, rhythmically, pulsing. I couldn't move. I was frozen in the driver's seat, my eyes locked on the pulsating cocoon. The rhythm was hypnotic, syncopated, and deeply wrong. It wasn't the steady beat of a heart. It was a slow, viscous undulation, like something digesting. The faint red light from the map was now matched by a soft, internal glow emanating from within the cocoon itself. The other cocoons hung motionless, dark and shriveled. They looked like rotten fruit. But the big one, it was alive. It was waiting. The air in the cab grew thick and stale, smelling of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sweet, like old blood and rotting honey. Then, a sound cut through the idling engine. A dry, crackling rustle. I watched, helpless, as a long, hairline fracture appeared on the surface of the large cocoon. A piece of the brittle, shell-like exterior flaked off and fell to the dark earth. Then another. Something was moving inside. Something was trying to get out. My mind, numb with terror, finally kicked into gear. Drive, get out, now. My foot, leaden and slow, moved from the brake to the accelerator. I pushed it down. The engine roared in protest, but the truck didn't move. The wheels spun, churning up the dark soil, but we were stuck. I was trapped. Panic seized me. I threw the truck into reverse, then back into drive, rocking it violently. Mud and filth sprayed from the tires, splattering against the windshield. Still, the truck wouldn't budge. I was mired in this place, anchored to this spot at the end of the world. Another, larger piece of the cocoon tore away. In the gap, I saw a glimpse of what was inside. It wasn't a face, not an insect, not anything I could put a name to. It was a shifting, wet darkness, shot through with filaments of that same hellish red light. It had no form, and yet it had a presence that pressed against my mind. A weight of immense, ancient age and a terrible, knowing hunger. It was in that moment of absolute, soul-crushing horror that I understood. The map wasn't just alive. It was a feeder, a lure. Those red lines weren't roads. They were fishing lines. And I was the bait. Or perhaps I was the catch. The thing in the tree, the heart of this rotten place, fed on something. On travelers. On their fear. On their very journey. The pulsing line on the map was its heartbeat. And it had led me here, to its lair, to be consumed. To be added to the collection of desiccated husks hanging from the branches. The compulsion that had drawn me here shattered. Replaced by the pure, undiluted instinct for survival. I wasn't going to be its next meal. I looked around frantically. I couldn't go forward. I couldn't go back. My eyes fell on the atlas, still glowing brightly on the passenger seat. The red line was a scar on the page. In a final, desperate act of defiance, I grabbed the book. I would burn it. I would tear it to pieces. But as my hands closed around the leather cover, a jolt, like a powerful electric shock, shot up my arms. A vision, not my own, flooded my mind. I saw 1,000 trucks, 1,000 cars, 1,000 lonely travelers on 1,000 lonely roads. I saw them looking at maps, at GPS screens, at hand-drawn directions. And I saw the red lines, my red lines, subtly weaving themselves into their reality, a psychic spider web cast across the entire continent. This thing, this horror in the tree, didn't just have one map. It had connections everywhere. It was a parasite on the very concept of the journey. And I was its newest, and most willing, delivery. The vision faded, leaving me gasping and clutching the atlas. My hands were fused to the cover. I could feel it now, a faint, thrumming connection running through the leather and into my nerves. It was a tether. I was bound to the map, and through it, to the thing in the tree. The cracking from the cocoon grew louder, more frantic. More of the shell fell away, and the red light from within grew brighter, illuminating the entire clearing in a bloody hue. The formless thing inside was coalescing, preparing to emerge. The hunger I felt emanating from it was a physical pressure, a vacuum trying to pull my soul from my body. I pulled at my hands, but they wouldn't come free. It was like they were set in concrete. I was going to die here, my essence drained, my body left to swing from a branch in this godforsaken hollow. A scream built in my throat, a raw, helpless sound of utter despair. But then, another thought surfaced, cold and clear amidst the panic. The map had a will. It had intelligence. It had brought me here for a reason. It didn't just want to consume me. It wanted to use me. I was a driver. I covered ground. I connected points, and that was my value. I stopped struggling. I forced my breathing to slow. I looked away from the horrific birth happening in front of me and stared directly at the glowing map in my hands. I poured every ounce of my will, my fear, my desperation, into a single, directed thought. It wasn't a word, it was a concept, an offer. Asterisk, let me go, and I will drive. I will keep your roads open. I will be your courier. But you do not get to have me today. Asterisk, the response was instantaneous. A wave of alien coldness washed through the connection in my hands. It was an intellect vast and ancient, considering my proposal. It felt my terror, but it also felt my resolve. It recognized the utility of a willing servant versus another consumed, mindless husk. A driver who could spread its influence, consciously or not, was more valuable than another piece of offal on its tree. The pressure in the cab lessened. The psychic hunger receded, not gone, but sated for the moment. The frantic cracking from the cocoon ceased. The red light within dimmed, and the thing inside settled back into its slow, digesting rhythm. It was going back to sleep. For now, with a final, painful jolt, my hands were released from the atlas. I fell back against the seat, my arms numb, my whole body trembling with adrenaline and relief. I looked out the windshield. The mist in the clearing was beginning to thin. The unnatural darkness was lifting. I didn't wait. I shoved the truck into reverse and, with a sickening lurch, the tires found purchase. The truck rolled backward, out of the clearing, back onto the narrow dirt track. I didn't stop until I was back on the paved road at the scenic overlook. The sun was setting, painting the sky in normal, beautiful shades of orange and purple. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, watching the ordinary world do its ordinary things. I was free, but I was not the same. That was 6 months ago. I still drive. It's all I know how to do. But my life is different now. The Atlas sits on the passenger seat, always. It no longer glows with a malevolent light. The red lines are still there, but they are dormant, faint. For now, I am a man who made a deal with the devil, or something far, far older. I am bound to the living map. My part of the bargain is simple. I must drive. I must keep moving. I feel a subtle pull sometimes, a nudge to take a certain exit, to follow a particular state road. And I do. I don't know why. Maybe I'm maintaining its web. Maybe I'm fertilizing its territory with my passage. I don't ask. I just drive. The dreams have stopped. The compulsive, feverish desire is gone. It has been replaced by a cold, hollow certainty. I am no longer my own man. I am a component in a vast, inhuman machine. I deliver my loads on time. I collect my pay, and in between, I trace the silent, invisible roads of my master. Sometimes, at a truck stop, I'll see another driver. Someone with a haunted look in their eyes, someone staring a little too long at a road atlas or a flickering GPS screen. Our eyes will meet for a second, and in that moment, I see it. The same knowing, the same bargain. We are the legion of the lost, the knights of the blacktop, serving a king that hungers in a dark wood. We don't speak. We just nod, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture of shared damnation. Then we get in our trucks, start our engines, and drive on, forever following the lines on our own living maps. waiting for the day the pulse returns. And the call comes once more.